And you are now live.
Okay, thank you. This is Senate Appropriations again, and we're taking up housing-related provisions within the budget adjustment. This year's budget adjustment is somewhat unique in terms of how expansive it is, and certainly housing is one of the big areas of requests. So we are lucky to have, because we're a little bit ahead of schedule, that Maura Collins is here from VHFA to speak to the request in the governor's proposed budget adjustment, and look forward to her testimony. And also just want to clarify, if you would, I believe perhaps your proposal was not included in the House passed BAA or part of it. So if you could speak to that as well, but obviously if you could just present the request, and then you can let us know what the bill will look like when it comes over from the other body. So thank you, Maura.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Maura Collins. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, VHFA. Because you're running ahead of schedule, which is amazing and wonderful, you're going to hear things a little out of order. I think Josh Hanford, as the Commissioner of Housing, would typically sort of tell you the big story of the BAA request. So we're going to jump into this nuanced detail to start. And there's actually two things in the BAA. The first is a homeownership development pilot proposal, which is the one that the House Appropriations Committee did not put forward, but encouraged us to talk to you all about. And the other VHFA related request is around a weatherization repayment assistance pilot. To start with the homeownership development pilot, you all heard in Tom Cavet's economic forecast that the prices of for sale homes are escalating at record levels, and he talked about a 17.7% increase over the past year and expected that would remain high throughout 2022. And he talked about, in fact, his quote in the slides to you all was that with interest rates low, plentiful capital, and a decade of underinvestment in new housing, all the ingredients are in place for record high price growth until supply catches up or incomes falter, probably not for several years. So now he said a decade of underinvestment, but I'd argue that he should have had an S on there and said decades of underinvestment. And that we know that Vermont had a building boom and a population boom in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Even in the 1980s, Vermont was still growing robustly. And in the 1980s, every year we were building around 3,200 homes for Vermonters as primary residences every year, 3,200. I'm not counting vacation homes. I'm just thinking about where Vermonters live year round. That every decade, that average growth has declined. And we've gotten to the point that in the last decade, we're only adding about 400 homes a year. And so we are not able to keep up with not only the potential growth of our state of people moving to Vermont, but in addition, we are not able to serve the Vermonters who are here adequately, as we see that household sizes are shrinking, meaning that we have more people from large families where children grow up and they need to have their own home. And sadly, divorces happen and one home needs to be covered by several. So this proposal is a proposal to serve, to create new homeownership stock that would be a subsidy for home builders and developers, where we know that there is a value gap in constructing new homes for purchase. We know that it may cost, in an example, $425,000 to build a home or to buy a dilapidated home and substantially rehabilitate it.
Oh, that's what I love doing. Buying dilapidated homes that need gazillions of repairs.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
that's
in
fine.
the process right now.
As you know, those repairs are escalating in cost. And so what we find is that while it may take $425,000 to buy a home and repair it or build from scratch, the minute the paint dries and the project is done, it's possible that the appraiser is going to come out and say that home is only valued at $375,000. That's the value gap that homes aren't appraising in the market rate for what they cost to renovate or build. And so this subsidy program would cover that value gap. And then it could be flexible enough that if we want to buy down that affordability more, we could provide a larger subsidy and target households at lower income levels who may need a bit more subsidy in order to afford that home. Combined, we would have, this program would have a lot of standards like we typically have in our housing construction, such as standards that would dictate the size of the homes that could be constructed or rehabilitated, the price per square foot, the builder profit that could be possible. These are all typical regulations that we put on the use of public money. Like we do, VHFA has been administering a state homeownership affordable housing tax credit program since 2000, and it's had a homeownership component since 2009. So we've already awarded over $14 million to create or rehab homes for purchase in this way. We are targeting this program at households earning somewhere between 80 and 120% of area median income. The governor's proposal had language going up to 140% of area median income, but as we continue to talk with not only industry participants, but also legislators and partners, we can see the advantage of having that be 120% AMI. There would be limits on the subsidy where it would only cover about 35%, a maximum of 35% of the development costs. And we picked that number because we are trying to model this program as much as we can over a federal tax credit program that has not yet passed, but we hope would pass in the future. And so we'd like this to be a supplemental source to use as leverage and to expand this program. I submitted a one-pager that describes the program to Chrissy earlier today. I haven't checked to see if it's up on the website.
Yeah, you've got it.
Fantastic. And so I'd be happy to answer questions about that, or I'd like to save just 2 minutes to explain the second part of VHFA's related BAA request, which has to do with weatherization.
Okay. And so what was the requested appropriation for this home ownership pilot?
Yes, thank you. I forgot you asked that question. That came in as a $5 million request in the governor's proposal. We testified in House Housing as well as House Appropriations, and they did not feel like the program was built out enough, and so wanted to have more details. When I speak of things like how the maximum income limit lowered from 140% of median income down to 120, that's an example of how we are continuing to have conversations to tweak the edges of this proposal. And we anticipate that a lot of the details of this would be nailed down in the kind of public hearings that we always have when we deliver new programs. VHFA administers over $36 million a year in federal tax credit and loan resources. And we do that through public processes where we have public plans that get into all the details. And that way we can ensure that these programs are nimble to the changing market and involve the voices of the developers and builders who are doing this work on the ground. So I think that some of that, I would say some of those not nailed down pieces, such as what would be the limits of the cost per square foot and things like that, are better done in a governance plan for the program as opposed to in legislation. So the $5 million was tacked on to VHCB's appropriation, which they'll be speaking about in a few minutes. In addition, and they also received their full $50 million that the governor had proposed. So right now, I think it came over to the House as saying that in total, VHCB would receive $55 million.
Questions on the home, how many individuals, would you anticipate 5 million would fund, and who are the lucky winners and who determines that? And the other question is, if this, depending on the amount of subsidy, which could be thousands of dollars, is there any, if the property is sold or anything, is there any sharing of the equities relative to the state's investment?
Yeah, the decision-making of who the lucky people would be, this would, again, these would be builders and developers who would be applying for this to VHFA. And again, we are used to this kind of prioritization and looking at the state's housing policies in the awards of the $36 million we're already administering on the rental side. And so we would take a similar approach in that way that really looked at where these proposals are going to be developed, as well as the depth of income that can be achieved and the leverage and other factors. We take all that into account as we prioritize if there was competition for these resources. As for the retained subsidy, it is difficult to, it is impossible to retain the subsidy of the value gap, because that money doesn't really exist, that value gap. You can't retain that piece of the subsidy. And we're proposing that if that home gets bought down and there's an additional subsidy to make the home more affordable, that subsidy stay with the home going forward. And so it not be able to be taken out by the homeowner. So it would benefit a homeowner because they can now afford a home that's priced within their price point, and they get to earn that equity during the time that they live there. And then when they sell, they don't walk away with the equity, it goes to the next home buyer. And a very
one of the things that the housing folks next door have been spending a lot of time on, and that is where housing development occurs, and to try to obviously, if you want to build houses in lots that aren't connected to municipal services, particularly water and sewer, then the development of those lots are quite expensive, as well as then you're developing sometimes, in my hometown, some beautiful fields are now planted with houses. So I'm just wondering to what extent if this money is put forward, that some of those parameters in terms of location and desired location relative to infilling, et cetera, are going to be part of the discussion around how this money is moved out. And I do know that there are some of our villages that don't have wastewater, or so the subsidy goes to the builder. And is it the building cost, or is it well, I don't know what is driving up the cost? Is it the price of the land? Is it the fact that there's such a shortage that it's a supply demand and driving up the cost that way? We hear that, people will just pay X amount over the asking price. So it just seems like there's so many factors that are driving that inflated cost of housing. And so I just was wondering how some of those other discussions around where development should occur, environmental concerns, in fact, will be integrated into your whatever parameters or standards you have, whether it be cost per square foot or whatever.
Yes, that is standard operating practice. VHFA, as I said, administers tens of millions of dollars every year, and all of that sticks within small circles around historic settlement patterns. And so we look at designated areas and we award the equivalent of points for that when looking at competitive applications. And we, as a standard, ensure that we're always looking at those smart growth principles to only build in certain areas. I also want to just reiterate that this is not just a new construction program. And so in a lot of ways, we would be working with builders and contractors who may be working on existing homes that have fallen off the market that could be brought back in this way. And so in that case, maybe it would be outside of the core village center, but it still would be bringing that community, it would be supporting the vitality of that community in that rehabilitation project. When you ask the question of, I just want to reiterate, you asked the question about why are prices the way they are. And I love going first and a bit out of order because we were ahead of schedule, but it wouldn't be fair for me to have my hour-long dissertation on all of the reasons I think we could point to of what causes it. But I do think that supply and demand is a crucial factor, which is why I started with some of those statistics about the lack of how Vermont's housing stock isn't keeping up with our household growth. And right now, the housing market is broken for the households that we're focusing on with this program. And so the goal of this program is not to be a home buyer program, like the very valuable and wonderful down payment assistance programs that we have that help home buyers, but this is a development program that is intended to try to bring homes to market. And in doing so, we're trying to address that supply and demand imbalance. And I think that answered all your questions. I hope.
So how many homes then for $5 million are you estimating would be involved here? In other words, how much progress would we be making toward meeting that the gap between demand and need?
Well, there's a few other aspects that'll influence that. One is that there is another piece to this pilot proposal that I skipped over because it's not a part of the BAA, but it's a critical component of making homes more affordable in this program. And that is a capital access program that we've applied to VHCB for $2 million to be complementary funding to this proposal. And that is going to their board with their staff's recommendation next week. And that is designed to be a way of buying down the guaranteeing or covering the risk of the construction loans that the builder has to get when building these homes. And by making that more affordable, that can be passed on to home buyers. And so between that program would be more of a revolving loan fund. We would set aside some money through various mechanisms to subsidize and guarantee those construction loans. And in doing so, when those construction loans are paid back, we could recycle that. And that will have the impact of helping, I think we said 100 homes over the next 6 years or so. Jen or Gus can correct me. I'm sorry. We just sent those numbers over the weekend. This program, it depends on how much we're actually buying down the subsidy and how much we're just covering the value gap. If we're just covering the value gap, we're serving over 100 more, we're building more than 100 more homes. But if we buy down the affordability down to, let's say, median income levels, then we can probably only help about 40 homes in this program. And so it really will be flexible with this $5 million, depending on what the needs of the builders are. And those needs change during construction. Like it's possible that we could imagine having a subsidy be a certain amount, but then costs rise or the market shifts during the 12 or 18 months of construction, and that subsidy amount needs to change by the time those homes come to the market. And so I know that the governor's budget proposal for FY23 includes another $10 million to grow this pilot for, he's hoping for a total of $15 million to build this out. And this would be ARPA funded, meaning that this wouldn't be done in 1 year, but this would happen until 2026 when the ARPA funding runs out.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of moving pieces here. I've got 3 hands up. So I'm going to start with Senator Westman, Senator Bruce, and then Senator Nitka.
Just a
So
comment.
Senator Westman.
just a comment. Your example is that you give with at 110 would be 45. And,
Okay.
and I'm very interested to see how you're going to pick people. Quite frankly, if I'm in the southern part of my county, the tick up in real estate prices in Stowe, Morrisville, and Cambridge far outweigh the construction costs now. If I'm in the northern part of the county, it doesn't. So and the difficulty is the hardest places for people to get into homes now are in those communities where there has been the biggest tick up in the cost of the homes. And it's pushing people into the rural areas in the northern part of my county. So I don't get what you're trying to do here. And I just built a house myself and put hundreds of thousands of dollars in it. And the appraisal came back from the bank almost double what I put in. And I put a lot of money.
Lot of Senator Westman has a lot of air miles.
I have a lot of air miles because I ran a lot through my credit card. But what I don't get is the appraisals in communities like Stowe, Morrisville, and in Cambridge far out exceed. And I got to tell you, I went $80,000 over my budget in building because the cost of materials, I get what you're saying about the cost of materials. But by the time I get to the northern part of my county, it's a different thing. And you might have a gap there, but there's there's pressure everywhere in this, but there's middle-class people are not able to buy homes in the towns where there's that huge pressure. I suspect it's the same thing for people like Senator Nitka in Ludlow, and it's not the same market in Springfield.
I just want to make one comment as well. If you're talking about 5 million could potentially, depending on what you're covering, would only be 40 households. That's a very large subsidy, is it not? Is that over $100,000, $125,000 that you could potentially go to one household?
Yes. And we see that, I mean, we know this from the homeownership tax credit program that the subsidies can be that high, as well as obviously on the rental side, there's many more times that can go to subsidize. Now it's a very different program and different market, absolutely. But I think what's important to remember, and I just want to underscore what Senator Westman said, which is that the data is showing actually that our ski communities, so it's interesting you say Ludlow and Stowe, but those are the communities where the home price appreciation has been fastest and highest, but that in each market, there is something unique going on. And so by covering both the value gap and the affordability gap, we're able to flex in different areas. And sometimes we do need to cover that value gap because the home is not appreciating for what it costs to build. And in that case, that's what we can provide through this program. In other cases, we may need to focus more on that affordability gap by buying down the home price because the residents can't afford homes that are being built in that community.
Okay, Senator Baruth and then Senator Nitka.
Yeah, I have to say, it sounds very expensive to me for what it's doing, and also very complicated in that it's working on both sides of the equation, subsidizing the builder, subsidizing the buyer, and trying in that way to sort of overwhelm the market and get the price we want. When I was on economic development, I put in the language that started the revolving fund for down payments for couples. And that made absolute perfect sense to me. It was great bang for the buck because it was money that was going to be returned into the fund and it helped people who really needed it. This strikes me as much more fraught in terms of who gets it, the locations, how much we're entering into the market on both sides. But then also for all that, we're talking about, even if the governor came up with the 15 million, I understand you to be saying that might, under some circumstances, get us maybe 120 houses. That seems like a huge cost and governmental intervention to produce a relatively small outcome. So color me just a little skeptical at this point.
Yeah, and so I think I should clarify, though, that this is a program that is really attacking this from the builder side. I hear you saying we're coming at from two sides.
Well, you're talking about buying down the affordability, right?
Yeah, and so that would, again, would be done through a land covenant that stays with the home, but the builder would not be able to know who the buyer was when beginning a development process. That the buyer comes actually at the very last minute in a development process. And so the builder would be setting what that sales price is early on and knowing what kind of household they were trying to attract and market to. And this would be complementary to the other programs like the down payment assistance that someone could come with if they were to buy a home, but maybe not. This really is trying to address the stock issue. And if we can get that federal tax credit that was proposed in Build Back Better passed, and if we can convince the feds to complement this program with other federal resources, that will make the money go farther. But right now, Vermont is doing something, I'll say innovative, although I know of several other states who are using their ARPA funds in this way, like Massachusetts and Maine, where we are trying to change the market. We have hundreds of years in this nation where we have subsidized the creation of affordable rental housing and not done anything to at a scale make affordable homeownership construction happen. And so this is doing something very innovative. We actually applied to VHCB for their piece of the pilot under their innovation fund, because this is very different. And so it is a shift in the market, but it's important. And our phones are ringing off the hook from builders and developers. And again, if I don't want to take up too much time, but we did an entire survey and several roundtables, focus groups with builders and architects and engineers and construction firms who have projects this spring, this summer that are not, are being shelved and are seeing high costs and escalating costs. And they are screaming at us for a product like this. There is really a need by the builder community to do more to support this kind of housing creation.
I'm going to move to Senator Nitka.
So I'm just wondering, what happens when the new owner goes to sell the home? Are the next set of buyers limited as to what their income is, who can purchase it, or how does that whole situation work?
We would do a subsidy covenant, and so the that value, let's say $50,000 went to the home, and that would be in the covenant, and so the next buyer would benefit from that subsidy covenant. And we're imagining it that VHFA would be the administrator, and we would check the income of the next buyer, and if they income qualified, then the next buyer would get that same $50,000 off their sales price. And if they weren't income qualified, then we could look at a way of recapturing that and see if we could roll forward to a new home.
So a wealthy person could they get in on it too? And could somebody from out of state take part in it?
Out of state, I would think yes. We haven't been contemplating in the public conversations we've been having. No one has been talking to us, asking us to limit this to Vermont-based buyers. And so we could contemplate that if that was important, but that's not what anyone has been asking for. The questions around
residency is a real problem. Residency is a terrible problem. People just have to have a statement of intent to reside. Yeah. There's court cases back when Vermont, when when we had the expansion of Medicaid, there was that you had to have lived in Vermont. I think it was, I don't remember, 6 months or something. And that got struck down. And the court said, residency, you can't impose a duration. It really is just the intent to reside. So conceivably, someone could move in last week and establish that and meet that residency as long as they say they intend to reside here.
And move out the next week.
Well, yeah, but a house is kind of hard to.
No, but I mean, there's so many, presently, a lot of people buying a home, sight unseen, no inspections, cash. And, would want to protect these homes from having that happen to them.
Oh, I understand that. I thought you meant in terms of coming in and benefiting from the program. If you're talking about 100,000 plus subsidy, that's what I thought you were talking about, Alice.
But again, the buyer doesn't take that subsidy with them. So that is a protection against flipping ththese homes, is that there wouldn't be that cash out in the end.
Okay, I was wondering about that. Other questions? Otherwise, I know that we're out of order. Should we go back and have Gus and Jen? Sorry, Maura. Oh, you were going to talk about weatherization? Okay.
I'm sorry, I just need a moment to say that also in the governor's request, last year you all funded $9 million to VHFA under ARPA. After you all concluded your business last year, the Treasury came out with some rules that said essentially that the way we are structuring our weatherization repayment pilot would not be ARPA eligible. The House didn't have any concerns about this and passed it switching to general funds. When you hear from Dan Riley later, you're going to hear about a tie between what he's talking about and the pilot I'm referencing. I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, there was a one-page memo. There was the second page of my attachment I sent to your committee that explains what the weatherization pilot is. I'm sure Senator Westman could give a dissertation on it as he hears about it a lot in his other committee, but I'd be happy to talk about that pilot or answering questions. But frankly, we just need to switch from ARPA funding to general funds because the pilot looks, feels, and acts like a loan, and we can't have loans beyond 2026 as being ARPA eligible.
Okay. All right. So, and then the House did do that.
Yes, and the program, otherwise this pilot will stop dead in the water if we can't get that switch. So that is very important.
There's a very short definition of this in the two-pager that she sent us.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now we'll go to the beginning of our witness list and go back to Gus and Jen from VHCB. So I guess, Gus, you're going to present your request.
Yeah. So very briefly, for the record, Gus Seelig for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and we'll screen share a brief 5-minute report that'll tell you where we are and what with the funding you've provided and where we think we're headed in terms of demand. So if Jen can screen share, we'll show you a few slides. And I just want to start by saying thank you for all the support that you've been giving to us going back to the governor's proposed housing revenue bond that you supported and through the CRF program. These first two pictures on the left is a net zero modular home that moved into a mobile home park in Bradford for somebody who's homeless. The Haven out of the Upper Valley is providing services. On the right, you'll recall that we talked about converting hotels to housing last year. We've done a lot of that all over the state. It's getting national attention. This one is in Williston, and we just closed on it with the Champlain Housing Trust, and it will become 72 apartments. Let's keep moving, Jen. We get asked regularly, why are so many people still stuck in motels? And this slide is just designed to tell you that lots of housing is getting built. It's at 3 times the rate over the last 3 years that we were at before 2020. Because of the CRF, a large percentage of the homes are going to people who are homeless, almost 45%. And as we add to the commitments we've already made, the numbers for late 22 and 2023 in terms of the units that will be produced will be going up. But since 2020, we've added 475 homes around the state. I think, and that we've also added 50 shelter beds that should be operational by June 22. And really important, as you know, we work with a network of nonprofit providers who are mission driven. And so as they had vacancies over the last year of a little over 1,200, more than 1 in 3 apartments, or about 1 in 3 apartments, went to households who were experiencing homelessness. So you'll hear from your Agency of Human Services that we got rehoused more than 1,300 Vermonters last year, and between the new homes and the turnovers, we made a significant contribution, as did Commissioner Hanford's VHIP program, which also has been doing terrific work. Let's move to the next slide, Jen. So this is just to give you the status of funding, and you gave it to us in 3 different buckets. So there was $10 million in the fast track bill. That is all committed. A little more than half of the ARPA funding is committed, and almost half of the state general funds are committed. And for the fast track program, on the left, you see an old motel site in Berlin that's under construction as the new shelter. The next picture, we just finished and will be opening about 15 apartments in Stowe next in February for folks who are homeless. We converted, corrections ended the use of a facility in Barrytown for former inmates, and we've converted that to additional shelter capacity. And then this is the old building on Cherry Street in St. Johnsbury that is also being repurposed and under construction now. So the fast track money was very important and is all underway as we speak. Let's go to the next slide. We're doing housing all over the state. This is an old warehouse building in Brattleboro that we hope is going to close in the next month or so on Flat Street with a private developer. They've run into a difficulty with their historic preservation tax credits, but they're working through that. And we've talked with Senator Starr, and I think talked with this committee, and we're initiating a farm labor housing program to repair farm labor housing around the state. Both the Champlain Housing Trust and UVM Extension have teamed up on that, and were the winners of an RFP we submitted for a program operator. So that will be operational in the coming weeks. Let's keep moving along. A couple of things we're recommending: about $12 million of more projects to our board next week, including this building in Putney that's adjacent to the food co-op. Among our pipeline projects, and we're always looking for places where we can reduce costs. So there's an existing development in Heinsberg already owned by one of our partners, and they're proposing a new 24-unit building to provide more housing for elders in that community. Let's keep moving along, Jen. This just gives you an idea of things that are going on all over the state. Again, we're always looking for bargain opportunities. So Brattleboro wants to reutilize and redevelop its municipal building, and the upper floors will be redeveloped, I think, as about 20 apartments for housing as it's being proposed. Rural Edge is working to purchase the convent in Newport, and Twin Pines and The Haven are working on 2 projects in Hartford. This is one of them, across from the Haven's existing facility with a church, to add more shelter capacity. We'll also, we think in March, be considering a hotel conversion in Hartford as well. Let's move along. So this is what the House did with the governor's request, which was to give us some ARPA funding, but also to give us some general fund is their proposal. That will be helpful just because of the ARPA rules that Maura was just speaking to, which limits our ability to use it with tax credits. It doesn't put it out of bounds completely, but it's definitely much less valuable to combine ARPA with tax credits. We're continuing to work with the congressional delegation on that issue, and I hope there'll be a resolution, but it's now likely months off rather than we hoped weeks off. So we'll continue to work at that. Let's go on to the next slide.
Gus, go back to the figures again. what the House did, is that what was in the governor's proposed, or did they give you more general fund than, I'm just wondering, or did they
They-
give you more ARPA? Could you just,
They- Okay, they reduced, they gave us a total, I believe, of $55 million, $30 million in general fund, which was not the governor's proposal. And I haven't heard from the administration on that, so they'll have to speak as to whether they support that or they want it to continue to be all ARPA, and then gave us 25 million in ARPA as well.
okay, because last year we had a lot of discussion and we felt the general fund, there were that, that for some of the work that needed to be done, you needed the flexibility that general fund would provide.
That, you know, I think you will hear from everybody that general fund, so I don't want to make myself a special case, is easier to use than anything that comes with federal strings. But as an example, if we're going to address farm labor housing, just given the fact that not everybody is here with full legal status, using state general fund is much easier than federal funds.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we move on? This is just an example. Again, we're always looking for free land. The site of this building is in Winooski, adjacent to the downtown at the O'Brien Center. This building's under construction. This is 20 affordable condominiums. We worked on this with the Champlain Housing Trust and VHFA, and also got, because it was in the right place, an out-of-state allocation of new markets tax credits that is going to make 20 apartments condominiums come online for under $200,000 a unit. They're going to begin marketing this in a few weeks, and it will be open for occupancy, they tell us, in September. And there'll be some significant outreach and marketing to the BIPOC community as well. So we have a long-standing relationship with VHFA and with our partners. There's about 1,200 shared equity homes in Vermont that have been home to about 1,800 Vermonters. And to that, I just want to add to Maura's testimony just a bit, which is we do fundamentally have a supply and demand problem around affordable housing. And the financing of new construction, and particularly condominiums, has become much more difficult. So Eric Farrell wanted to build a condominium building up at Cambrian Heights, with most of the units being market rate, but some being affordable. And the problem he ran into at that time was the banks would not lend him the money unless he could show that half the units were sold before he put a stick in the ground, put a shovel in the ground. And so the program that we are proposing to our board to support with VHFA is a guarantee program that would help builders get financed by guaranteeing 15% of their development. So that's the plan that's underway. But there clearly is a shortage. In our earlier slide, we showed 50 homes for home ownership across the state. About 10 or 12 of them will be built by Habitat for Humanity. A lot of our work is what we call a buyer-driven program, where we provide a subsidy to a buyer, they find the home they want. And over the last year, as you can imagine, people have taken those subsidies, been pre-qualified for mortgage, but they've simply been outbid for the properties that are on the market. So that's moving more slowly than we'd like it to. Let's move on to the next slide. So just as we finish up some examples of work that's gone on around the state, and in Hartford, we built with the Twin Pines Housing Trust this development that I think totals something like 50 units in 2 phases. In Lindenville, last year we opened Olivia Place, which is right on the main drag. In Bennington, we're replacing the existing family shelter with a building across the street. It's under construction now. And Senator Westman may have a better sense, but this building in Morrisville, I'm told the roof is going on this week, and there'll be 20 apartments right in the downtown. So there's lots of, while the numbers of people stuck in our motels is still way too high, there is progress being made all over the state, and please accept our thanks, because it wouldn't be happening but for your support. And with that, we can take the slides down and answer any questions you have.
Okay, questions?
Madam Chair, it's Senator Ballant.
Yes. Yes, Senator Bell.
Nice to see you, Gus. I'm just a little confused about the situation you talked about with Eric Farrell and the condominiums at Cambrian Rise. Are you telling me that the banks were not willing to give the loans because they were worried there wouldn't be, take up on those condominiums, given that we have such a low vacancy rate? Can you help me understand this? I don't understand that.
This is so I'm telling you a story that happened probably 2 years ago now, but since the financial meltdown, and so this is not particular to Vermont banks,
Yeah.
because banks across the country lost so much money. They basically have said to builders, we want to see 50% pre-sales before we're going to finance you. And maybe the market has changed so much that that might be plausible today. But the other problem we have with home ownership, and this speaks to the very difficult issues you're talking about, and I'm going to speak from personal experience now. My daughter, who's a legal aid attorney, has decided it's time to come back to Calais and build on our land. And a friend of mine who's been building for 30 years came out. She wants to just build 1,500 square feet. And she said, what's it going to cost? And he said, right now, RK Miles, which is the local lumber company, will hold pricing for me for 48 hours. So for a home I'm going to build, not going to start for another year, I really can't give you any assurance about cost, but don't count on, even though the land is free, less than $400,000. And that's why you're hearing, I'm sure, from employers across the state, whether they want to hire nurses or any teachers or firefighters, that there's just not a lot of ability. It goes back to what Senator Kitchell said. We have a supply problem at this point at all levels. Our work is very much focused on the essential workers. So sometimes people talk about workforce housing that are of more modest income who need rental housing, people who are the janitorial staff, food service staff in our hospitals, but also doing medical work, healthcare workers of all sorts. But we also, and historically, quite frankly, your committee and the committee in the House have asked us to focus on the lowest income Vermonters.
Right.
We've always had a home ownership program. It probably needed to be larger, especially to meet the current moment.
Thank you.
Senator Baruth and then Senator Starr. And
Thank you.
Okay, Sears.
Thank you, Gus. A couple of questions about Butternut Station.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what stage that's at now, in terms of, is it yet to start? Is it midway through, or is it complete?
It's under construction. I can't tell you the exact level, but when I saw Michael Monti on another call this morning, he said they'd be marketing it within a couple of weeks with September occupancy.
Okay. And then I believe you said that you helped them by guaranteeing 15%?
No, the proposal that Maura has given us is going to be, we help that project by providing subsidies for the home buyers. And bringing the total cost down. And they combine that with the tax credit program Maura administers. And then they got an out-of-state investment of something called new market tax credits that help them further bring the cost down for the home buyers. So you'll be able, if you qualify by income, you'll be able to buy a condominium there for under $200,000. And that'll be a 3-bedroom condominium. So pretty spacious in that part of Vermont.
So what would be the mortgage payment on 200,000?
I'm going to have to get back to you on that question. I can't do the math in my head. And, one other thing that makes...
I was just wondering, relative to the target of 30% of income, that's all I was just wondering. That's all.
Yeah, at their price points, they're going to get to buyers that are in the 60%, 65% of median income range, given the price points they're trying to achieve here.
And just one last thing, is that in the actual footprint of the O'Brien Center?
Yes, it's in the parking lot. What was the parking lot of the O'Brien Center?
So the O'Brien Center itself was raised?
No, it's still there, and there are still buildings behind it. So if you think about that large parking lot that's in front of that commercial
yeah.
space, that's where it's going up.
Okay, great.
Hmm.
So the committee wins both ways. They keep the meeting space and the, services there, but also have the condos. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And it also speaks to a positive trend, which is Winooski's providing this land for free. I was in Manchester with Maura and Josh a few weeks ago. And again, the town of Manchester has a couple commercial buildings and a parking lot behind it that they're thinking about for affordable housing development. So we're seeing more of that. Same thing with Brattleboro saying, let's take our municipal building and make the upper floors available for housing. And it's going to take every kind of effort we can imagine to solve this problem.
Thank you.
Senator Starr and then Senator Sears. You're muted, Bobby. I know it's rare.
That's not nice.
I thought I'd bring a little levity to a very heavy topic.
Yeah, thanks, Gus, for your presentation. Farm labor housing, I know we've already heard from some farmers in regards to that, and very pleased that you guys are getting that going. The Newport, the Rural Edge buying that Newport convent, that's a great project. The buildings that are there are all very solid. I think, they need redoing, but I think they'll make some major changes for the city of Newport and in that. The other issue I wanted to mention is that we had Cabot Creamery in last week, and we were talking about their labor problems, and they said, well, we really wish we had some good housing to offer new laborers, because we think we could get them if we had the proper housing. And I said, well, I think a lot of that depends if there's a place to put these houses. And they said, well, we own 200 acres and we'd be more than glad to work with whoever to try to get some housing on, that property would be fine with us. So I just wanted to pass that along to you folks. And what they need to do, I guess, is find some housing agency maybe to work with them to proceed.
So two things on that, Senator. One, I've got a request from the woman who heads up the National Bank of Middlebury for a meeting that's going to take place sometime in the next 2 weeks. Talk about housing in Middlebury. It's probably been 10 years since we built something new in Middlebury. We did build something new in Virgins last year. So we'll be on that meeting. On and off over the last 6 years, we've had discussions also with Middlebury College, which owns an awful lot of land in Middlebury, about whether they'd be willing to make some land available for housing. So definitely folks in Middlebury are ready to have a conversation, and we'll be part of that.
What about Cabot? He's talking about
this
Cabot.
was Cabot Creamery, Agrimart Cabot in Cabot.
So I was told that that they also had a plant over in the Middlebury area that they didn't have workforce for. So Cabot's a whole different set of things. We did a tiny project in Cabot some years ago, and we'd be happy to talk about what we could do there as well.
Do they have a wastewater system?
I believe Cabot does, but I'm going to have to double check. I think that they got an EPA grant or something that helped them do a wastewater system there, but they're just over the hill from me, as you know, so I'll find out.
Yeah. Okay. Senator Sears and then Senator Westman.
Thank you. Gus, a couple of questions. The first one is about the municipal building in Brattleboro. Does that still house the police station?
I don't know that.
No,
No, it does
Senator
not.
Ballin is, okay, I was just wondering who wanted to live above a police station.
Yeah, no, they moved out to the old newspaper
Oh,
building
okay.
out on the north end of town.
I
Oh,
feel
good.
very secure.
Oh, you would, I'm sure, but I
Yeah.
can imagine that some of my former clients would prefer not to live above a police station.
Yeah.
But the second point or question is about the Bennington project on Pleasant Street. And I think that's a great example of taking a building that was in disrepair and going to be a blight to the neighborhood. Not that there isn't a lot of blight in that area, but that, taking some of those old buildings and repurposing them really helps not only for housing, but it also helps the community. And I'm hoping that we can continue doing that around the state. I think it's an important initiative. You have these old buildings that, you can rehabilitate and use. So
They
it
tend to
serves
be a
lot
little
of
bit more
purposes.
costly, don't they, Dick?
Well, yeah, but on the other hand, you're enhancing a community's,
Yeah, I know, I agree. I just
so I
think
think it's worth it, even though they are a little more expensive.
it seems like that's been one of the problems or one of the complaints Gus has been dealing with. And it's like, well, why does it cost so much? And yet when you're dealing with downtown buildings, historic buildings, et cetera, there are cost factors that kick in that you might not have with new construction, but certainly they deal with the issue of blighted and existing property. So, but
By the way, that was a compliment, Gus.
Thank you, Senator.
I think you better take it and run. Senator
Well,
Sears just gave you a compliment.
Anytime I'll take it and run, but I do want to also say, because we didn't put it in the slideshow, Senator Sears, 2 years ago or 3, when we were visiting, you took me over to meet the fellow at Turning Point, and I know he's not there anymore, but we have a recommendation going to our board for recovery residents with Turning Point next week. And then there's a second project in Bennington with V4 that'll also, we hope will get to our board in March. Wasn't quite ready for this meeting, but thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Senator Westman, you
So-
had a question?
Yeah, I really appreciate the presentation, Gus, and the examples. It would be nice if somehow you could pick out a few different some difference of these projects and give us the numbers for examples. Like, for example, when you say these condominiums, how many is it? What was the total cost? And how much per unit did it cost to develop it? And what were you talking about when you, for dollars, when you say buy down by 15% to get the unit built? I can't compare these projects to each other because they're all so very different. And but if we had those kind of numbers, we could make some comparison.
I'd be happy offline to do that, Senator, and follow up with you on that. That's absolutely an appropriate question. My goal today was to say the dollars are moving, they're getting out all over the state. You're making a difference with your appropriations, and there's more to be done. But what I can tell you about, for instance, the motel projects, that motel conversions, hotel conversions we've done, is it's generally at least a third less expensive than new construction and happens more quickly. So there's value in that. On the other hand, and we've made this point with the building in downtown St. Johnsbury and others across the state, Putnam Block in Bennington, that, as Senator Sears was saying, when we revitalize these historic buildings in the core of our communities, Arthur's was another, it has other positive impacts. But the costs are very different all over the state. And I know we're going too fast to really talk about the numbers today, but I'm happy to follow up with you on that.
And probably we can get more with the 23 when you come in for the 23 budget as well.
But as we're asked to fund a new program, I'd like to see the numbers to make sure that when I compare those, that I know I'm getting the best bang for my buck.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Senator Ballin, and then we have one more witness. I just want to let people know.
Okay.
Go ahead,
So-
Senator Ballin.
So Gus, one of the things that the speaker and I heard when we were doing our ARPA engagement tour was that, yes, there, of course, there's a crisis in housing across the state, but one thing that bubbled up in a lot of communities is that there's not a lot of, doesn't seem to be a lot of housing coming online that's with multiple bedrooms for people who are, you know, parents with kids, that it seems to be a lot of single occupancy. Same issue with some of the shelter space. There doesn't seem to be a lot available to accommodate families who are homeless. I'm just wondering if you can speak to what the breakdown is currently about and I know there's housing needed across the board. I'm just trying to get a sense of.
So I think several different points here. And one is that household size in Vermont over the years that I've done this work has shrunk. So if it was 1990, we were almost 3 people per household. Today, we're about 2. And that's part of why, even though we haven't grown a whole lot as a state, we need more housing, is that we have less people living in each home. Second, the average house, because of the average household size, when people go to do market studies, mostly what they find the demand for is 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. We used to have a priority for 2 bedrooms and larger in our multifamily developments. Having said that, you know, whether it's refugees that we're welcoming to the state or others, we do need to begin to think about, where do we need larger units? This is a conversation I've had with Josh and with Maura. A different thing I think we need to think about in how we build the housing is, if more people are going to work remotely, you know, and you have a child at home, do we need to build it, at least be building in a small nook that where you have, so that you can work from home, so that becomes an option. So I think you're asking a question that really goes to the need for flexibility, not having one size fit all. And, you know, I know your community is, I think, about to accept a number of refugees, and there's some temporary housing, but it's going to take something more. I actually spoke with Chris Hart from Brattleboro Housing Partnerships the other day, because there's some land at Melrose Place that can be redeveloped that's not in the floodplain. So that's one of the things that's on our minds, is how do we accommodate where there is a need for larger bedroom sizes, where we may need occasionally a 4-bedroom apartment, which we almost never build anymore. Where are we going to do that and how? So you're asking me exactly the right question.
Thank you, Gus.
Yeah, thanks. Well, now we're going on, unless there are more questions of Gus, and Jen is here. Dan Riley's here regarding Efficiency Vermont and the appropriation. And it seems like it's the same issue that Maura was talking about, and that was money being appropriated from ARPA for weatherization. And that turns out to be problematic relative to some subsequent guidance. So Dan, if you're here, I think you are. I've seen you. You're just on I have to scroll the screen. And I also, Josh, you're also on, and we've skipped all around. So I'll let you finish up. You've heard most everybody else's testimony. So Dan, can you just quickly talk to us about the weatherization situation from your perspective?
Sure, no problem. For the record, Daniel Riley, Public Affairs Director for Efficiency Vermont. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for accommodating this last-minute request and for letting me come before the committee today. I'll go as quickly as I can. Last year in the budget, the legislature appropriated $5 million to Efficiency Vermont for weatherization incentives and $2 million to Efficiency Vermont for workforce development initiatives and the expansion of NeighborWorks of Western Vermont's Heat Squad programs. Those appropriations were always discussed as part of a package alongside that $9 million RAP program that Maura had referred to, that she submitted the memo to the committee to today. Senator Westman's heard this analogy many times and said it natural, but when we think of weatherization, it's always 3 legs to the stool that always have to work together in terms of incentives, financing, and workforce, right? These projects are expensive. You need direct incentives to buy down the cost to make them affordable. even the rest of that cost has to be met through financing options, and then you need workers to be able to undergo these projects. So they all moved together last year, and we're asking for that as well at the moment. So last year, both of these Efficiency Vermont appropriations were funded with ARPA dollars. And based on the interim Treasury guidance that was released last May, we were optimistic that they would be eligible. Unfortunately, the recently released Treasury final rule made a sudden and unexpected change to the definition of moderate income, revising those standards down from the state of Vermont's accepted definition of 120%. Down to 65. So that sudden, because of this ruling and this sudden change, last week, Guidehouse and AOA informed Efficiency Vermont that they were pausing review of the grant questionnaire, really sort of, if this was a baseball game, really at the top of the ninth inning, right? At the very end of the process. We have not yet received formal confirmation that the program is going to be eligible, hence why I'm here today. Switching these to general funds in the BAA would be the quickest and easiest way to ensure continuity. If I can, just to give you a little bit of a quick background on these two appropriations, starting with the $5 million for weatherization incentives. These are really specifically targeted at the moderate income level. You know, these are really the people that don't qualify for the low income measures through OEO. But, you know, a lot of times it's sort of that donut hole that falls sort of right below 120% of median income that really has a desire to weatherize their homes, but can't often afford it. You know, for context, in Caledonia County, you know, 120% of AMI is only $60,676 a year. The average weatherization project that we see is between $7,500 and $8,000. So an $8,000 project is really out of reach for a lot of those folks. And so, you know, we're really trying to help reach those moderate income Vermonters, all to say nothing of the contractor, the energy efficiency contractor community that we work with that are really chomping at the bit to get ramped up. You know, they're dealing with these supply chain delays. They're dealing with these workforce delays that you've heard in housing, that you've heard in so many other settings. So, you know, getting these incentives out in the marketplace, giving them certainty would be a big boon for their business.
So, Dan, in your memo to me, you said you had for the $5 million for weatherization incentives, which you just talked about, and then there was the $2 million for workforce development. Are you asking that both of those be switched? And obviously, I'm just wondering the timing here, because you're under a grant. Well, how come Maura's weatherization made it in the budget adjustment request and yours didn't?
It's a great question.
Did you ask for it and it wasn't
we
approved,
knew the loan
was
issue was
timing?
coming, right? Yep. Because the RAP program was a loan, we had a good sense several months ago that this was not going to be an eligible use. Right up until that Treasury final guidance came out, I believe on January 10th or 11th, we thought this was going to be eligible using these standard definitions of moderate and low income. This was a very sudden change, hence the last minute request. And you know, if possible, we would like these two appropriations to move together. Let me just give you some quick context on that $2 million. So the other $2 million was to Efficiency Vermont to support workforce development initiatives and NeighborWorks of Western Vermont's Heat Squad initiative. The Heat Squad is a service of the nonprofit NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, which offers one-stop energy efficiency for all income levels in the Northeast Kingdom and Bennington. These are really the two areas of the state that have the fewest certified energy efficiency contractors. It's really a great program that really helps people weatherize in two parts of the state that it can be very difficult to find a contractor. So so it was $1 million for them for that, and then $1 million to add much needed capacity to the weatherization workforce where the need is.
So let me ask, Dan, are you saying that $2 million is also not ARPA eligible?
Correct. Both the 5 and the 2 appropriations were both paused at the very last minute by AOA and Guidehouse because of this definition issue.
Okay. It seems like workforce we've done a lot of ARPA funding of workforce. That's why I was wondering why this was not allowable, I guess, is the best way.
The key point that, Madam Chair, that I would really like to make is without this funding, NeighborWorks has told us that staff positions could potentially be at risk. Hence
Yeah.
the urgency of really trying to avoid layoffs. In addition, NeighborWorks has informed us that the future of the Heat Squad program could be at risk without this. And so that's really why we're here today. I will say, for full context, AOA and Guidehouse are trying to resolve this issue. We have heard positive signals from them. We have heard positive signals from the Scott administration, but nothing definitive. Hence why I'm here today in terms of just asking to be included. Even if there was a substitution clause, even if there was something that says, should these funds at a later date be deemed eligible, they could be swapped out. It's really to avoid the potential of layoffs and to really try to get moving as fast as we can for our state to achieve their weatherization goals. So let me stop there.
All right, thank you. Well, maybe because we have a little bit more time, AOA and Guidehouse will have some clarity of absolutely no or yes, it's okay. Any questions of Dan? So this is a proposed, what was being in the budget was using ARPA funds, which in light of the most recent guidance would suggest that that's not a permissible use, still yet to be finalized. And so we'll put this on our list of that. And this was only addressed at us because it's the last minute. So this wasn't considered by the House, and it wasn't.
Unfortunately, no.
No, and it wasn't really right for proposal to be included in the governor's proposed BAA.
The last point I would just want to make is that, this is really intertwined with that RAP program that Maura has talked about. VHFA has been a great partner. We think they've designed a wonderful program. Maura, I don't know if you want to talk at all about the way they're linked,
No.
But these appropriations have always really traveled together.
Okay, no, I understand. My point is, if they've traveled together, why weren't they traveling together in the governor's proposed BAA? That's what I'm asking.
And again, it's because we thought based on the interim guidance definitions of moderate income.
So that's how I understand it. All right. But Maura had there was a definite determination about how that weatherization program would be working, would not qualify. I guess it was known earlier on. Okay.
Sure.
Any questions of Dan? All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Glad you could make it on such short notice. All right, Josh, I'm going to have you finish up. We had Sean Brown, but I see he just left. So,
yes, I told him that we would email him when we were ready for DCF.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. So, Josh, thank you for being so patient.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for having me. I guess to round things, take us home here, want to set us back with the governor's $75 million BAA ask for housing, all of ARPA funds. Knowing the general funds are precious and have more flexibility, we designed a BAA ask that can show the development community that we're serious about building more housing and address critical needs right now. I've heard some comments about how it's unusual to propose new programs and add so much in the BAA. But, it's pretty unusual times and pretty unusual amounts of money out there. And we feel a real honest obligation to meet the demands that Vermonters are asking us from, the folks that are in homeless shelters to the businesses that are asking for homes for their workers to live in that aren't living in cars and commuting 2 hours each way. And so we've taken this very serious, been meeting with our partners, with Maura and Gus, weekly about what we can do to keep the housing pipeline moving. And the governor's proposal was 3 parts here. The $50 million to VHCB to continue the great work on rapidly bringing on mixed in rental apartments. We put specific discussion points around, can we help with larger units such as the refugee needs? Can we help with recovery housing? We see, huge challenges there. Like, let's use this rental housing to address a lot of the needs out there. And then we supported this pilot project for missing middle income homeownership development. I mean, the real problem is the supply side. It's not supply, it's demand, it's scarcity. We have a scarcity of homes for folks to buy at a price point that working Vermonters need. And our homeowner side subsidies, the down payment assistance and other, they're going unused because you can't find a home to buy. And so we need to spark the development in the supply side. And, there could be 100 different ways to look at, how we can do this, and questions about the model and why do you do it this, why do you do it that. But the bottom line is, we're presenting an option here. We're not competing against any other proposals that are out there that I'm aware of to spur missing middle income homeownership development. And so we're presenting something for folks to say, let's try it out. This is ARPA. We've got to do something in this realm. We're hollowing out the chance for middle income Vermonters to be homeowners in this state. And we can't let that slip any longer. We've 3 decades of underbuilding. The data is clear. The costs are rising sharply. We're presenting a model. It might not be perfect. It might be something we need to correct course and adjust as we go, but we've got to try something. And we're not competing against anyone else's proposal here, and it's ARPA. And then finally, VHIP.
I guess, Josh, from your testimony, should we conclude that you're not supporting what the House did to split the 75 and use some general fund? You're recommending, you're still saying it should all be ARPA.
I'm saying
telling us?
The governor's proposal was ARPA for BAA. I don't know what else is competing for those general funds. I understand how those general funds provide more flexibility. Absolutely. Understand what Gus was saying. I can't give a position that we oppose that, right now or support it, but our proposal was 50 million of ARPA.
But you're supporting certainly the 75. We got that.
Yes. And so then the last piece of this is to continue the VHIP, Vermont Housing Improvement Program. Just a quick history, we started that with CARES Act funding, and $7.2 million. We've been able to bring on 251 units of housing, half of that serving folks exiting homelessness, and the numbers are just really impressive. If you go from, Brattleboro, 19 units, Springfield, 17 units, Windsor, 12, Lindenville, 16, St. Johnsbury, 7, the list just goes on and on about how many units we've been able to bring on, 251 half serving homeless families at an average cost of about $23,000 or $24,000 per unit. And so the next piece here was the $5 million appropriation of ARPA funds to continue doing this work, the VHIP, to add on to those 251 units. And we've already obligated that $5 million. The homeownership centers have already asked for more money, and all of those funds, all of those units will support folks exiting homelessness. And what we've heard back from them very loud and clear is it's really hard to run a program like this with such needs out there and such demand when they have to wait until now, July 1st to start back up and worrying about laying off staff. So that's why the BAA has such a large request here to seamlessly continue this program and bring on more than 400 more units. And, this isn't going to happen in the next 4 months of this fiscal year. This is to use throughout the duration of the ARPA eligibility. But we need to keep awarding these projects to property owners that are willing to do this work, bring on new units, and serve those exiting homelessness, and work with our nonprofit housing partners in each of the regions of the state. These 251 units is in every county in the state, and there's way more demand. And we feel we've got to continue this program to serve those folks in need. And this is a place where ARPA works perfectly. These are grants. The money's spent and it meets the income eligibility. And, we feel that with such a challenge to use ARPA for all the different aspects that people want to use it for, this is a great fit to continue that program without delay.
Well, I think you're trying to persuade us, and I'm not sure we need persuading. The question becomes more of the mechanics, because last year in the housing bill that the governor vetoed, there was, some definition of the program. We put the money into the budget, and then there was discussion around, what are the rules that apply? And I thought we had worked out something, but then I got a communication from a member of the House Housing Committee and said none of the money had gone out because I think because of some of the legal questions about parameters. So I'm really confused in terms of the money that was already in the 22 budget for VHIP was 5 million, I think. And there was some delay, and then we had some back and forth communication, and I thought you said, you know, it had been moved out. And then I was quite surprised a week ago to be told by somebody in housing that no, that never happened. Can you tell me what happened? Did it happen?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, sure. The delay was simply that we didn't have contracts and grants moving fast enough. You know, we had legal review of the appropriation in the budget to do this program, which was based off of codified legislation the year before to use the CRF money with $30,000 maximum grants, you know, match requirements and goals to serve those exiting homelessness. We simply continued that program. And in our statutory language that, you know, developed the Department of Housing and Community Development, it specifically tells us to run and establish programs to serve housing and community development needs. We do that just since I've been in the department. I've probably moved $100 million in grant programs that had no instructions from the legislature, from federal funds, from Irene recovery to recovery housing. We go through a similar process to develop public rules and processes to move money and develop housing programs all the time.
So let me ask, I'm totally confused then. So you in fact did start moving to that money out using the old rules that were in place.
All 5 million is obligated with each of the homeownership centers. They asked for more than we had available and have landlords and folks waiting in homeless shelters to move into housing. Hence why we asked for a BAA to add more to the program, so they don't have to wait till July 1 in the fiscal year 23 budget to restart the program, worrying about laying off staff because of not admin expenses to cover their time. And we use the same parameters that we've been following since the beginning of the program. I can understand, you know, the concerns around, there was this policy bill for VHIP that was caught up in the rental registry veto. You know, all along, you know, that program had been started with the emphasis around general fund to support an ongoing program. In fact, we've been using emergency pandemic relief funds to quickly bring online housing that is serving people, serving them well, and getting great connections between the continuum of care organization.
So why is housing under the impression that 5 million is all tied up and hasn't gone out?
I don't think they are anymore. I mean, they recommended the 20 million in VHIP in the BAA unconditional.
All right, so I've got the 20 million in the BAA that's coming over, but our Economic Development Committee is interested in putting the program rules that were in the vetoed bill with that money.
Yep. You know, the one thing I just want to say to this, because I've heard a lot of folks, you know, interested in, can this be a solution for more ADUs? And we didn't do many ADUs with the first round of VHIP. You know, we had very limited time to bring on units, and they're more expensive than the $30,000 cap. And so, you know, I would argue that we may be better served to not place the exact caps that are on it now, because, you know, it's in our interest, it's in the homeownership's interest to get the most units online as possible with these funds. But in some cases, to bring an ADU online, the cap with the 20% match we have right now, we'll have to say no to those projects. And some of these homes that we're rehabbing and turning into multiple apartments are in very bad shape, and costs are only rising. We know costs are rising. So if we have this $30,000 cap period, that's it. We'll be saying no to new housing that could be moving people out of homelessness. And I don't know if that's the shared goal that we have.
So what you're saying is the program parameters that were in the vetoed bill, it had a $30,000 cap, which you feel is too low.
We've been working under that cap, and that cap was established 2 years ago. I think just anyone costs, if that was acceptable 2 years ago, they've already risen 20%. And so costs are rising. And, you know, if you look at, we proposed over 400 units with the $20 million addition to VHIP. That is already putting in a calculator of saying, if you allow us to, we set a maximum now at 50,000, we can get 400 units at least. I don't know what the right balance is here is between having some oversight and policy, which I understand, and having the goal of trying to take advantage of every opportunity that's out there when you're dealing with such a small public investment for what you're getting. 5 years of affordability, serving folks exiting homelessness, fixing dilapidated apartments, and continuing to do this rapidly. What's the right balance? Is what I'm struggling with, understanding that. Yeah.
I'm just trying to struggle with aligning the old rules that you're currently using that were put in place with this day's CRF funding to now it's 20 million. It used to be 20 million would die over. Now we talk about it as if it's almost inconsequential. So I have to understand, at least from my colleagues in the Senate, the extent to which they want that 20 million to go out under those pre-existing CRF rules, or whether they want them modified with the 20 million that you're asking for now. That's why I'm struggling here to figure it out. And I need to get some feedback. And I don't know if you've testified in front of that committee or not, but that's going to be the question. So the House basically is saying 20 million, just do it the way you've been doing it.
I testified in House Appropriations on the BAA. I brought up the same fact that we can run it at the $30,000 cap, but if you want to get ADUs and you want to deal with some very dilapidated housing, we'll have to say no to projects.
Yeah. So have you testified to that effect? Because I know ADUs were a real strong priority and area of focus for the Senate Economic Development Committee. So I'm just trying to understand what you've testified or there.
Yep. I mean, I have testified a few times in Senate Economic Development, but not specifically on the BAA. We're discussing S210, which has the old VHIP model, again, attached to the rental registry. And, I think we can stick with the 30,000. I'm just saying we're going to struggle doing ADUs with that as a cap and a 20% match. They're just more expensive than that. And I think we really can bring on a lot of good housing if we had a little bit higher limits and a little bit of flexibility here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll see if we can have some further discussion on that. So you have the 20 million in there. It's just under the old CRF pre-existing program.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would ask you we followed the guidance from the old program, and that's what we followed. In fact, we've been stricter. We've just done those exiting homeless housing. If the budget language it doesn't mention this at all, I would follow the wishes of the appropriators of how they want to see this handled. Either put a cap in there or tell us, yes, have some flexibility to do these units, and we'll follow what your wishes are there. I know we're in a struggle with the policy, but this is congressional, pandemic relief funds with congressional intent to move it fast, serve those in needs. And it's not ongoing general funds to create an ongoing program, which should have more parameters around it. So I think we're all in the same place here that leaves a little bit of question, but a common goal.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I have one for Josh.
Yeah, Senator Starr, I
Josh,
can't see you.
That's just as well.
Oh.
But anyways, Josh, you mentioned 20% increase, and if we had a cap of 30,000 and 20%, it's certainly a long ways from 50. It's closer to $40,000 cap. Would that if you had, say, 5 units in a house, 5 separate units, that owner could get up to $200,000 even at 40,000, right, to remodel and make those 5 apartments. So would 40 work? It must be it'd work better than 30. And
clearly it would be more helpful. I think, one of the ways I look at this is we want the most public benefit possible. Obviously, serving families exiting homelessness is more public benefit than someone at 80% AMI, which is the cap for these units. I would like to structure the program that gives folks that commit to serving those exiting homelessness a higher grant amount. Maybe it's 40, and those that are having a lower sort of commitment that get less. Those are the sort of flexibilities that grant programs that I run through the community development program that we do all the time. Every year, we look at the benefit, the money, and set standards and set limits and matches, and are judged by the sort of the public and the folks that are receiving it. And you got to remember, these ARPA funds have an overlay with it. It's not like we have unlimited use of these funds. We have the federal requirements to use these funds that are our guideposts here. But I would take any increase because I think costs are rising, and I think the easy fixes are becoming less and less available. And we have some very dilapidated homes out there, and some of them are only one unit. They're one family homes, and one $40,000 grant to fix a home that you see it, I see it where I live, that's sitting vacant and falling apart is not enough to do it. And
Okay. Well, we'll have to try to get some discussion with our Senator Sirotkin and the committee, because it seems like the House gave 20, but that with the understanding that it was with the pre-existing rules, and that capped you at 30, which is a problem.
yeah, I mean, I will say that I think there's a between the Appropriations Committee and the House General, I think there's a difference there. I think Appropriations clearly heard what I said, and we're not adding any restrictions to that I'm aware of. So this is where I think wherever we end up on this BAA.
So the Appropriations Committee said, here's 20 million and there's no rules, you make them up?
Well, they understand how the program is functioning, and I testified about this added cost if we want to do ADUs, and they took that and didn't add any language to their support of the request. So I don't know how to exactly interpret that.
Okay.
But
All right. Well, we've got a lot of clarifying to do, so I won't ask you to interpret what our colleagues in the other body thought or did, but I'll see what my colleagues feel about what kind of language, or whether make it clear that the 30,000 can be more, or the extent to which we leave it totally up to discretion, which I think probably might not be the end result, but we need to have some further discussion. Other questions of Josh? Okay, Senator Sears had to leave. Senator Nitka had to go to another committee. And so I'm going to, unless we have further questions, wrap up this part of our scheduled testimony today, and then we'll move on because we have DCF waiting to testify on their budget adjustment. So thank you very much, and we'll see if we can figure this out. Josh, I'm sorry, it's just so confusing about who understood what and who's saying what, et cetera. So I'm glad the 5 million went out, because that was my impression last fall based on our exchange of emails.
Yep, that's why we're asking for more. Yep.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot for all of your work.
Yeah.
You too.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll go to Sean. There he is. I see the commissioner, and he's still upright and smiling. So thank you. Appreciate it. I thought we might have you a little earlier, but housing discussion took a little longer. So Sean, you have some staff with you, but you're going to do the presentation in terms of what's being requested?
Yes, with me today, I have our interim chief financial officer, Megan Smeaton, who's filling in for Sarah Truckle, who's moved on to a position in the AHS secretary's office. And Sarah might jump in too in a little bit if she's available, in case there's questions too, that she helped put the BAA together. I just plan to work from the ups and downs document, and we could have Megan pull that up, or if you have it on your iPads, I could just go through it and highlight the areas for the committee.
Oh, well, we do have it on our other device. It's the 22 BAA department request from DCF. So, but you can, committee, do you want it pulled up? I don't know. I think so. Yes, Sean, pull it up. I've got it here on my other
Yeah.
computer, but
Sure.
but it'll be easier. You have screen sharing? Chrissy, give it to you? Oh, okay.
Perfect.
All right.
Can you see it, everybody?
Yes, it's fine. Thank you.
Okay, unless there's questions, I'll jump right into
No,
walking.
please do.
Okay. The first line item is really a net neutral. We're creating a centralized grants and contracts unit within DCF. Currently, all of our divisions and units have their own team, and here to create
Is it
efficiency.
possible to take the page 1 off? Maybe not. I don't know. The other one, other document that Chrissy had sent us doesn't have it, but it's okay. I don't think there is a page 2, is there?
Okay, what I'm working from on my document is a page 1. So it might be just differently numbered in your document versus ours.
I don't have a page thing on it.
Okay. So we're in the admin budget, and that'd be page 1 of our presentation right here.
All right, well,
Sean,
let's.
I think what Senator Kitchell means is the big lettering. Is there a way to remove that?
The big lettering.
Yeah,
Across
page
the
1.
center of the page where it says page 1.
Oh, the watermark? Okay.
Yeah.
And if it's easier, this is Chrissy. I'm happy to share my screen because I saved it as a PDF and it went away.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Would you like me to share my screen?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Chrissy. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Oh, I'm
the
sorry,
one
I was
Chrissy
missing
attached
that.
doesn't have that page 1 mark on it. How many pages do you have, Commissioner?
I think 7.
Oh, my goodness.
So Megan, if you could stop sharing your screen, I can share my screen.
Okay.
Well, as you know, Senator, it all revolves around DCF, so we do need a big budget, so.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, when Medicaid used to be part of the department, you had an even bigger budget.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
And,
Yeah, so
if something is relatively small, we don't need to get down, but just point out the highlights here as
Sure.
you're looking at it.
I think the highlight I'd want to on the admin budget, and you'll see this in the Family Services Division budget as well, is that the targeted case management statistic adjustment. So because our programs draw down different funding sources, whether it's state funds, federal specific funds, global commitment investment, and so on. We do time studies to allocate our cost of our program staff's time. And our targeted case management rate has not been in line with our random moment time studies. And so we are correcting that in the budget. So you'll see some changes here in the admin budget, because that's something some of our admin is cost allocated out to our different divisions and funding sources. And we've been over allocating some FSD time to federal programs when that's more state funded. And so you'll see that here where there's under the targeted case management statistic adjustment, there's a $600,000 up in admin and a $600,000, excuse me, down in Medicaid global commitment funds. That was quite a slip. And then the other thing I would point out that, and this is net neutral, but just for the committee's awareness, historically the 211 contract that has been held and administered at the agency level, and just given much of the work is connected to DCF and the referral service and the after hours emergency housing, that's just being transferred to DCF, and you'll see that in the admin budget. And then I think that's some of the others are much smaller dollars and net neutral, so I won't.
Except the big one here is your operating. Is that the 2 million? for your child welfare, your federal match. That's not changing then?
Yeah, that's actually not, what it is that closeout last year, we closed out to the good, and we made a request to carry forward some funds for specific needs, and one was to help move forward the first phase to replace our child welfare information system. And so this is drawing down the federal match for a $2 million general fund that we carried forward at closeout last year to this year. And this is just drawing down those federal funds as match for those carry forward funds. It's at a 1-for-1 match rate from our federal partner.
Okay. One of the things that we found from the study that UVM did was the data system that you have is just antiquated. And so is this the first installment on a replacement of that child welfare information system?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
What is the total estimated cost of is it around 10?
It's more than that. I think we have some documentation we can share with the committee. I don't have that available, but we do have a high level estimate of what that will take for all the different components to be built. And we can provide that to the committee, but I believe it's over $10 million.
Yeah, all right. I know it was not cheap.
I
Okay,
shouldn't-
Senator Westman.
I shouldn't say this, but I thought it was 13, but you know, my memory's not the best.
All right, any further questions on this? So what you're asking for here, then did the House accommodate this?
I believe so.
Okay. All right.
And then moving on to the family services budget, there's a few items here. This is one of our more active areas in the budget adjustment would be the family services depth ID. You'll see an total up of just over $500,000 for temp staffing true ups. Some that's GF, some's 4E federal funds, and then a portion of it is Medicaid global commitment. We've just been overspending that line item in excess of the budget, and this just trues it up and brings our spending in line with the budget.
So the temps, where are you using the temps, Sean?
We have temp staff across the department. We have case aid temps. We have like recruitment and retention specialists for foster parents that are temps. I think we use some temps in the centralized intake unit, and there may be some other temp position in the districts as well.
Okay.
And here again, you'll see a swing of just over almost $1.3 million from Medicaid to GF due to the random moment time studies. And then here, the big items down in the grants. Our sub-adopt caseload costs are rising. This is a caseload adjustment. You'll see an up of 1.65 million approximately. 992,000, but approximately is GF, and then 653,000 approximately is for.
Do you have any adoptions that aren't subsidized?
I can get you a breakout of those adoption caseloads for you if the committee would like that information.
It's just it's something that we see fairly routinely is an increase in those subsidized adoptions, and I just seemed and I know that they're really important because sometimes the children being adopted have very significant needs. So
Yes.
I was
Yes.
just wondering whether, in fact, we end up just about virtually all the time having to subsidize these adoptions. But it was just a question.
Sure.
Okay, so now we're down to substitute care, and that's up as well.
Yes, that's up as there, just terms of the cost per case and then the number of cases. So this is a caseload adjustment as well. And Megan, I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in here on any additional information on this caseload pressure.
Yes, there's an alignment both in terms of the type of revenue that we are spending based on the caseloads that we're seeing. So you'll see that there's more Medicaid being spent, and that's what the request is for. we've put both the old average caseloads and the new average caseload in the parentheses. So if you have questions about that, you can see how the caseload and the cost per case is changing between what we had estimated for 22 and what we're estimating for 21, what we had estimated for 22's build and what we're estimating for 22's BAA.
All right.
And then moving to the next line item, the Jjp Mentoring Grant. This is a federal grant we receive. Historically, we've received it through the excess receipts process, and here is just capturing it and putting it into the base instead of continually going through the excess receipts process to draw it down and utilize it. The other change here is it's net neutral. We had, again, at closeout, we'd asked to carry forward some funds available given the increase in construction costs due to the pandemic. Construction material costs are rising, and with the projected renovations of the facility in Newberry, we asked to carry forward $500,000 of GF to help cover those costs. And here you'll see it's net neutral. It's just transferring it from the FSD line item into the secure residential treatment line item where those costs are being captured.
Well, you aren't able to do anything until you get the permit, can you?
Correct. That is correct. But at the time while we had applied for it and working with the general contractor, estimating out the cost of the renovations due to the increased prices and materials, they were projecting an increase in the overall project cost. Obviously, if that project does not move forward, ultimately those funds would most likely be utilized on the other project we're starting to plan as I wouldn't call it Plan B, but we're starting to contingency plan for a facility on state-owned land and be a state-owned facility in the event that we are not able to secure the local permit through the environmental appeal.
Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner,
Yes, Senator Burrows.
just wondering in that potential Plan B, is that essentially the same operation just moved to a new location?
No, it could look a little different, Senator. You know, in one of the things we're being asked to consider in a bill that's come out of Senate Judiciary that you may be familiar with is making a recommendation how we provide secure services to 18 and 19-year-olds. And we would probably expand the scope of this other facility we're starting to plan for to be able to serve that age of emerging adults as well in that facility.
And one last question. Senator Sears had a suggestion to use land at one of the prisons, making sure to keep these folks out of sound and sight. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's been several bills introduced, one in the House and one in the Senate, asking DCF to.
No, I don't mean, I mean your Plan B, not the bill.
No, Plan B would not be utilizing a wing at Marble Valley. It would be building a new facility, standalone facility to meet the needs of youth under 18 and then 18 and 19-year-olds that we would serve under Raise the Age that might need that level of secure service.
Just out of curiosity, and I realize that this is all speculative and contingent, but what would you say would be the timeline for ground up construction?
And then this is high level in my recent conversations with the commissioner of BGS and just a back of the envelope. Could be as quick as 3.5 years if it's on state-owned land and we're able to move quickly, or 5 years if there are snags like we're hitting in the town of Newbury regarding permitting. We are moving forward on a shorter term solution. In the meantime, working with Sheriff Mark Anderson, who's purchased a new building and is willing to work with us and create a space up above where the sheriff's department is going to be, a floor above. That would be a 4 to 6 bed
This is
program.
down in Wyndham.
Yes, in the Wyndham area. Yes, and that's
Yeah.
something we can move forward with much quicker. And we have an agreement in principle to move forward on that. So we can meet the short-term needs while we continue to plan for the longer-term needs.
Thank you.
All right, I think we better keep going if you've got 7 slides. So we're on number 2 here.
Sure. And some of the others will go much quicker. The other thing I'd want to point out, similar to the temp staffing true up, we've also been looking to true up our grants and contracts, have been out of alignment with what the budget and what we've been needing to spend to meet the needs of the youth we serve with our different providers. And so this just is a true up of that as well. And then, so that is a total, a line item. It's an up of GF of almost $500,000, a down of federal funds of $750 million, and up of GF. So it's actual. It's Sarah Truckle. Do you want to explain this one? I may have misspoke a little bit.
Yeah, so we're changing the revenue and the cost allocation behind our contracts and grants based on the way that DCF has operationalized those contracts and grants in the way that they've shifted over the last several years, recognizing that there's an increased association of costs and expenditures in GF.
Thank you. You're much more articulate in saying that than I was. Thank you.
Okay, so when we get down to the bottom line, then general fund in this appropriation, in this family services is $495, almost $500,000 here, for a total of 2.3 with the other Medicaid or federal funds.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Questions on that? This is certainly truing up in terms of, the cost, what you can do under the cost allocation, substitute care, and actual experience of adoptions.
Yes.
So, okay. And then the larger discussion obviously is going to be around a Woodside replacement, but that's a much longer discussion than the BAA, and
Yes.
will touch several committees. So let's, unless there are questions about this, move on to child development.
Yes, and we can move through that. It's a not quite as robust a BAA request for the CDD division as of the FSD division. Again, here you'll see the grants and contracts restructure and net neutral. There's also some other stabilization adjustments that are net neutral in our budget as well. I think the thing I'd want to highlight for the committee here would be we are seeing a subsidy underutilization. And so you will see a down of $814,000 in the child care subsidy line due to that's caseload underutilization.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would point out that's net neutral in prior budget, we were anticipating restructuring our transportation between family services and the child development division. We went out for a request for proposal. We really didn't receive a viable response that met our needs. And so you'll see us moving forward and maintaining the transportation services as they exist.
We knew that was a heavy lift, Sean.
Yes.
So,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So this shouldn't be a surprise, I guess.
Yes, correct.
All right, so that's child development, and I suppose that, the underutilization, to some extent, that ties into some of the provider payments that because of revenue loss, et cetera, or having to close because of COVID. So I guess what is being saved here on underutilization to some extent is being addressed through other payments to the childcare system.
Yes, we did, last fall, end of the summer, fall, we were, I believe in joint, on the stabilization funds, and received authority to move forward with a $29 million stabilization program for childcare providers. So that program was created, and we began issuing payments out to providers in November. There are rolling applications in this program according to the federal guidelines. About 78% of the child care providers in the state are currently participating in that program. And so we envision those payments going out through the rest of this year into October at that time. And so we're issuing out proportionally each month a portion of that $29 million out to providers.
Okay. I'm going to keep going unless people have questions, and I can't see very well because of the document. So speak up, but I don't hear anyone speaking up. So we'll move on to the next. I expect Office of Child Support's nothing change.
No changes to Aged Blind, the AABD program. General assistance, just some net neutral changes, no changes there, given we're using 100% FEMA money to cover the cost of emergency housing right now, which is meeting the full need. And then once we lose access to those federal funds, we'll be moving to the federal emergency rental assistance dollars to support households and motels after that time. No changes to the Three Squares Vermont budget. And then moving on to Reach Up. Really no major changes there other than some minor adjustments. LIHEAP, no major changes in the BAA. We did receive a substantial federal award of stimulus dollars for this program, and I believe we drew those down through the excess receipts process, if I'm not mistaken. And so this year we've been able to issue out a substantially increased benefit and some new benefits to Vermonters in this program and across the board. So it's been incredibly helpful. And we can provide additional information if the committee's interested.
Yeah, I know there was a big slug of money that went for weatherization, LIHEAP.
Yes, yep. And then the next area we'd want to focus some time on would be the Office of Economic Opportunity. These are housing related under the governor's housing plan. Given our constraints and motel availability, we have been housing households outside of their home district as a result of capacity issues. And historically we've not provided transportation, but given the large number of households, we are transporting those households and providing this service. And so this $600,000 GF ask is to help us cover those transportation.
So where are you transporting them to, Sean?
So we may have hotel capacity in hotels in the central Vermont area, and Chittenden County is incredibly challenged right now with capacity issues, made worse by the fire at the malfunctioning of the fire sprinkler system. And so we're having to move households to like central Vermont or Rutland or other areas. And so we're having to provide transport.
So are you using public transit on demand services, or how are you providing those to get people to where the housing is?
So for households that do not have their own transportation, we're using like taxis or other services. And then for those who have a vehicle but not the means to pay for gas to get there, we'll be providing a gas card for those.
I see. Okay.
Yep.
So the big one here is your 5 million rental risk.
Yes. The to help bring more private units back into serving folks exiting homelessness. A lot of landlords are nervous about renting to many of the households we serve, just given prior experiences or risks involved. And so by having this rental risk pool. We can provide some assurances that if our landlord brings a unit online and works with us and they experience a loss, that we have resources available to help cover them. It's to keep those markets, those units on the market and available for us to access. The lack of units right now is incredibly challenging in trying to move households from homelessness to being permanently housed. And so anything we can do to bring more units to market is incredibly important right now. And we know with conversations of some landlords having this risk pool will allow them to bring units to market as the up you would see, I think, in Josh Hannaford's budget regarding VHIP, renovating some of those units that are offline also is a part of that strategy as well to bring more units online. And then we have been using a rapid resolution fund to help people with those costs when they do locate permanent housing and they're transitioning out of homelessness. We were using CRF dollars for that. Households were eligible, I believe, up to $8,800 per household for expenses like utility deposits, getting utilities turned on, also like first and last month's rent, security deposits, furniture, anything they might need to get established in their new place. But the CRF dollars went away at the end of December. And this is an incredibly important resource as we continue to move households out of homelessness to permanent housing. And so we're asking for some state funds to help continue that work.
Okay. And did the House change any of these appropriations or requested appropriations?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so the 5
million. I would
million.
need to verify that because things have been moving quickly in the House.
Okay. So I mean, for the rental risk that to mitigation, the 5 million. I know that sometimes it makes a difference whether someone will rent or not, depending on past rental history. Questions on.
We did get questions just for transparency in the House, and they may be happening here as well. Why we're asking for general fund and not maybe some other type of federal dollars that are available. And the flexibility that we have with general fund and the ability to move quickly is the basis of our GF ask. A lot of the federal dollars come with conditions or restrictions on how they can be used and reporting requirements, which can really slow down our ability to access and get those funds out the door. And just given the urgency regarding housing and our need to rehouse folks, we believe the flexibility provided by general fund makes the most sense to us.
Right. Do we have any other questions, or is that the last screen?
Yeah, I think the other area I would touch on is just you would see those dollars from the FSD budget being transferred in, and then also we transferred out to the FSD budget 200,000 when Woodside closed. We negotiated with the CL program in Bennington to serve a higher level of youth, and as a result of the cost structure of their contract increased, and so we drew that cost increase because they're serving a higher level of kids out of the secure residential treatment line item to meet those costs. But it is a net neutral to the overall budget. You just see the money.
Okay, it's just moving it from one section of the budget. Okay.
And then the next one would be the disability determination services, and really no change there. That's almost primarily federally funded. So
right.
Really very minimal impact on the general fund budget. Yep. And I think that's our
final.
Yep.
Okay.
The other thing I would want to bring to the committee's attention is the language included in the budget adjust regarding.
I was wondering if you were going to get to that,
yes.
Commissioner.
Yes. As we know that the funding we're using now to cover the cost of motel stays, FEMA, it's scheduled right now to go away at the end of March. There's a chance it could be extended, but if not, our plan is to use the federal emergency rental assistance, and those dollars come with some requirements for our use in this way to pay for motel stays. They require like an occupancy agreement between the household and the establishment. And there's a concern, given their rental dollars, that there could be a tenancy created, which would give pause to many of our hotels to continue to work with us, given there's an existing carve out for general assistance emergency housing. We want to extend that carve out to this new program that we're standing up outside of GA, but still run by the department and still serving the same households in the same way, but in this program outside of GA, using emergency rental assistance, which will allow those households that funding for each household will qualify for up to 15 to 18 months of funding. So it will allow us to keep serving those households for that period of time. However, we want to ensure motels still have that carve out. So we propose language that would extend that carve out to this program. We provided some language, legal aid raised some concern, and then we've submitted some modified language to the House, which clarifies it's only to the program administered by DCF in using these funds, and that it would sunset in, I think, July of 2025 when these funds go away and when this program would no longer be operating at that point. And so we believe it's critical that that language be in place to give assurances to motels that they can still work with us without the risk of establishing tenancy, which creates all sorts of issues in terms of their permits and their occupancy permits with the communities that they're short-term stays and not long-term tenancy establishments.
So that was a requested language. I believe the House did not include it. The chair of Appropriations indicated to me that that was kind of an open issue. Obviously, the advantage is those are federal dollars. Those of us who are on joint fiscal, that was a huge slug of money. The question was how we could begin to use it all, but it does come with a certain conditions. So that raised the question around motels and the occupancy requirement and how we could use those funds. So we want to have more discussion on that because it's still an open issue. And the commissioner indicated that the work group met yesterday, and it's going to be meeting again next week to see if there's some way that we can address that requirement, because as indicated, the motels would it would substantially reduce the number of units that might be available. And yet we want to make sure that we're accessing those federal dollars. So it's really hard. The challenge is how to blend the use of those dollars for the motels, because there simply isn't enough housing at this point to move into permanent housing and for the period of time. And so the carve out that exists in our GA program when we're paying for motel rooms, the department wanted to apply as well here. And so we're going to have to deal with that, but hopefully the work group can come up with some agreement. I think it gets into filing rules perhaps, and what protections. So I just want to alert the committee that we've talked about it a little bit in the past, that this is something that it's going to have to be figured out, but with the advantage of a little bit more time than the House had, and the work group coming together on this, hopefully we can work out something that will deal with keeping as many of these units available in motels, since there isn't other housing available, and allow us to access these federal dollars, of which there are millions and millions. What was it, 200 million, 150 million? It was a huge amount that came to Vermont.
Yeah, it was like almost 250 million by memory, a substantial amount of money.
It was a huge amount. So that's hopefully something that can be figured out, and having the benefit of a bit more time.
Yes.
So Any other language that you have in there, Sean?
I don't believe so. I believe that
Okay.
was our
Okay, all
language
right.
there.
So that was the question about, and rather than trying to force fit this into the GA program, which I've said for a long time, we really shouldn't attempt to do that. We should create a separate program that is funded specifically by these federal dollars that come with these federal rules, and work with them within a separate program apart from the GA, which gets into, it's hugely complicated to try to force fit those federal regulations in a pre-existing state-funded emergency assistance program that never was designed or anticipated to address a pandemic. So other questions of the commissioner? Okay, you've certainly got a lot on your plate. And if we don't have more questions today, we're at 4:00. And I think we will call it a day. Thank you. If we have more questions, obviously, Commissioner, we'll be looking forward to any updates in terms of the work group and how we might proceed in a way that addresses any of the concerns that have been raised, but allows us to access those federal dollars, because the cost, last I knew, emergency housing last year under CRF was over $100 million with housing and I think nutrition. So it is not something that the general fund ordinarily, even now, could pick up. It's a huge expenditure.
Yes, and I would say we were allocated initially 38 million of emergency rental assistance when we thought FEMA was going to end earlier this year. Given that it's been extended through March, it could be extended. We still have those funds available. However, at right now we're at over 1,400 households in motels, and with an average cost of over $100 a night, the costs get pretty high pretty quickly. And so we most likely will be going back through the joint fiscal process to access more of those funds for 23 once we get the program outlined, built, and we understand those costs, because there'll be some additional costs that we don't see in the GA program. Given that it's a rental assistance program, we're actually able to pay security deposits to motels, which is something we've not been able to do in the GA program. And so those are costs we need to calculate as well upfront as we transition to this program in the coming months.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to suggest then we've put in a long afternoon. We've taken no break. And so